Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope you are well. Welcome to this first part in a two-part series of transforming the customer experience. Specifically, we're focusing on the B2C, the business to customer market, and how you can exploit the cloud to deliver a better customer experience. So in this two-part series, we're going to be focusing on, this first part is focusing on the core infrastructure elements, and in the second part, we will be looking more data and AI elements to improve that customer experience. So let's begin. My name is Godwin. I am the Principal Cloud Evangelist for Cloud Direct. I have built it and broke it in every cloud, and my job is to share my knowledge and experience with prospects, colleagues, customers alike to help them on their cloud journey, whether it's knowledge sharing, providing insights. That's effectively my job. I'm a free of charge resource. I do not work in sales. I'm not on any commission. And I'm quite active in sharing my knowledge. It's something I'm very passionate about, is helping people in their cloud space. So I'm very active on platforms such as LinkedIn. And you can see on the screen now, you can see my contact details if there's any questions you might have about your cloud journey. So I definitely encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn, especially I'm very active in the AI space. So from a B2C perspective, we're at an interesting time when it comes to B2C. I'm having lots and lots of conversations. I would say about 60% of my week is chatting to organizations like yours about the challenges they face, the fact that the landscape is changing. There are tools and services available, but the art of the possible isn't necessarily well known or well understood. But also wanting to modernize and not be a laggard organization, whilst at the same time being aware that actually there are cost implications to these things, and how can you embrace these new technologies within a constrained budget landscape. And so that's something I'm very, very aware of, and a lot of my work and activity is very much conscious of that budget side of things. And hopefully today I'll show you some elements that will help you see that actually not only is doing things better and faster available to you in the cloud, but actually potentially also cheaper than you're doing it currently today. So think of this as a session and with the first part of your cloud journey, where we would look at things like how you might modernize or how you might embrace cloud. Now, my audience on this call is going to be at various stages from that. So I'm going to touch on some of these stages you've already completed, some of them you're yet to go through. So as you go through this webinar, just think about where you are as an organization on this cloud journey. And then as we move into webinar number 2, which is in about 3 weeks' time, we can see with some of the more advanced things that are available to you. So on that cloud journey, and just ask yourself openly, where do you think you are on this 5-step process? Have you yet to move to the cloud? Is that something that you've yet to do, or yet to do in a meaningful way? You might have a small footprint, but your core operations are still on-prem or elsewhere. You have moved to the cloud, but actually you're not gaining the cost efficiencies that you were hoping to have. So what are the opportunities to optimize? If that's where you are, then this call is for you. If you're looking to modernize and embrace some of the capabilities, that's something we will explore both here and in other sessions, where in the future we're covering off the data analytics piece, which shouldn't be underestimated, and is much easier than you think and much more powerful than you realize, and a lot more cost effective perhaps than you might believe either. And ultimately we come up to that elevating your business to deliver more innovation, to deliver better customer experiences, but they're built on a solid foundation. You could just jump to that end state, and it might offer a great customer experience, but it wouldn't necessarily be in a scalable, sustainable, cost-efficient way. So we're just going to examine the first few steps on this journey in this webinar. So why are people looking, in this case, Azure, to migrate to the cloud to improve that customer experience? The motivations are myriad, but touching on some of them, scalability is an interesting one. Some organizations, especially those more aligned with the e-commerce space or the mergers and acquisitions space, scalability sits slightly higher up the priority than other B2C organizations. They would look to scale because they have peaks, whether it is demand, sales campaigns, sales events, the acquisition of a new company, that can create peaks and troughs in demand throughout the year. So having that scalability can be useful. Having flexibility to be able to use the resources how you want and move up the cloud stack. So most organizations, unfortunately, still make the mistake that they treat public cloud infrastructure as an alternative hosting environment to an on-prem or a VMware type thing. If you are doing that, you will glean some benefits, but you are missing out on the absolute nuggets of benefit that are available from the public cloud by moving up the cloud stack. So reliability and performance. Again, when you have those loads, it can be an issue. One of the interesting things about the performance side of things is VMware is a very common source environment prior to migrating to the cloud. What a lot of organizations do is there is a contention ratio of their CPU to the cloud. So you've got a CPU that's potentially 5 or 7 years old, and maybe that for every physical core on that CPU, it's being split up into 2, 4, 7 virtual cores. Whereas when you move to the cloud, it's 1-to-1. So a core on the CPU that's in the cloud is a whole core. The virtual core is one whole core. And so organizations can benefit instantly from just moving to the cloud in terms of performance, much more modern. And of course, it's constantly being refreshed. So rather than being faced with a 5-year, say, CapEx refresh life cycle, you can change it every few months if you're so inclined, because as new capabilities come out, and what happens is some of those new capabilities are delivering greater performance at a lower price point as core density on CPUs gets cheaper. More dense. And then of course you've got the reliability side of things, being able to, if you can deliver an infrastructure at less than half the price of an on-premise, then potentially you can deliver high availability, whether that would be through load balancing or disaster recovery. Having those capabilities are much more readily available and again, much cheaper than you might imagine. And then this week focus on moving up the cloud stack. So I'm working with an organization at the moment. They have 700 SQL databases and they are moving to one Azure database as a service, Azure SQL, and the difference in cost is profound. There are also things like serverless computing. These are more nuanced concepts that I'm very, very passionate about. When you don't have to pay for an operating system, things are cheaper. When you can do things in a serverless way, you start to benefit from much greater cost efficiency and performance efficiency. And these are things such as Azure Functions, Automate, Logic Apps, web apps, and so on. You can move up the cloud stack to these platforms as a service that actually wrap in a level of availability, support, scalability, often cheaper than it would be running it as infrastructure as a service. And it's an easy, quick win for some elements. Some of it require some technical knowledge to be able to achieve. Then there's security. In your organization, I bet today you say, right, I've got security, I've got my X, Y, and Z system. But most, I can remember working for an organization, we'd sell Palo Altos, great pieces of equipment, but effectively that would be running for, say, 5 years. But the security landscape doesn't stay still. The threat landscape certainly doesn't. And you can innovate and get more technologies. You can just go to the Azure marketplace, procure something that is much more agile, and remove your existing budget from something else, because you committed, say, to a month's spend on a particular security product. Something better and cheaper comes out, you can switch over to those. And so instead of having these long runways of 5-year procurement cycles to introduce, you can actually be much more agile in an organization. And of course, cloud is very, very aware of the cloud threats. So the speed of innovation in the cloud is much, much greater as well in terms of bringing these services and capabilities to you. And then we have our data-driven insights. I will touch on this in more detail. I will touch on it now, but I'll go into much more detail in the next webinar. But organizations are still treat data as silos. It's sales data, it's customer data, it's finance data, it's personnel data. Data is your most valuable asset. Treat it holistically as a single object, and then start getting insights across the board. Yes, you might be getting a load of activity running in one part of your business, but can we see in the data the impact that's having on another part of your business, whether it be a campaign that drives data, that drives traffic to a website, which increases sales, which overruns the inventory system, which generates more calls to the service desk. There is a relationship between these data, and looking at it in the round can start to understand and make data-driven decisions that are more intelligent, enabling you to grow and deliver a better customer experience. So, how can you start your journey? Identify where you are on that journey. So you may be, and I'm going to jump to different elements of this stage. Ask yourself, where are you in that journey in yourself? Are you looking to optimize what you already have? So can you transform what you have to make it more optimal? Can you rationalize? This is a huge one. I work with many organizations that when they rationalize, because there are a load of cloud native capabilities, they don't need to migrate these other legacy capabilities. And some of these capabilities are so much cheaper and more efficient and more modern and deliver more value, literally better, faster, cheaper. So rationalizing is a really good way that you can optimize your costs. And then there are other elements. You won't be at the beginning of your journey in the top right hand corner, where you're maybe looking to undertake your cloud journey. Come up with a business case. Cloud is an IT project. Cloud is a business project. Anything you do, again, remember, better, faster, cheaper. Better for whom? Who's going to benefit from the speed? Who's going to benefit from the cost? Aligning your business objectives with your cloud adoption, absolutely critical. And so many organizations just treat it as, I've got some servers over here, now I want to run them over there. You're not maximizing the benefit. But when you do come to do some element of migration, make sure you assess to understand the interdependencies of your systems and which ones are appropriate, because that can also produce the target costs that will inform your business case. And then design against best practice. Transform your organization. The skills required to cloud are different for that, for on-premise and traditional third-line IT or traditional projects. When you migrate, do so with the correct tools, equipment, personnel, and following a best practice approach. And I'll touch on that best practice approach. And then when it comes to running in the cloud, there are so many cloud services that are available to you that are incredibly cost effective, that integrate with a whole load of existing tools, or you can just natively use them, that will deliver much better outcomes that enable you to align and measure your key performance indicators for your business. So putting that together is and using those cloud native tools can be a massive accelerator. So if we look at, say, I want to put together my business case. Let's just look at where it sits in that overall model. So there's going to be deployment costs and licensing costs and management costs and various application costs, and all of those collectively together will make up your financial baseline. But if you've got a business case, what benefit is it delivering to the business, and how is that element of the cost going to benefit that business? This is where you group stuff. Now, in this example on the screen, it's grouped by the X as a service type, but it could be grouped by department. You can slice it up however you want. But what's important is, if you are going to make a change, don't just think of it as your parent budget, but drill down. If I'm delivering a business change that's going to deliver a certain amount of value, what is the cost of that element of change? You might be migrating a whole load of stuff, but there's a benefit for a single department, let's say, and you're doing something transformational. So make sure that you group those items and measure it against the baseline. Then ultimately you should, and what your goal is, especially in the better, faster, cheaper model, you're looking at what's your existing cost base, and what is going to be saved as a result of this change. And so you can measure your as is and your to be, and then you can compare that against existing budgets. Your as is may exceed your existing budget. I've seen that multiple times. So making this change and actually making sure you've got a handle before you start. And not a lot of people put enough time and effort into the planning stages. So when it comes to that business case, you should be doing anything you do in the cloud. You should be all asking yourself, what are my business goals? What is it I'm trying to achieve? Why am I doing this? I always say, one of my common phrases is, if it isn't achieving better, faster, cheaper, don't do it. If it's not, it's got to achieve at least one of those things, ideally all three. So what are your business goals? And then from a cloud strategy, how is what you're going to do with cloud aligning itself to that strategy? This is a new paradigm in terms of approach. Too many organizations fail to really address this point. I'm doing this change because it enables my business strategy to achieve X. And understand what those are. Understand what services that you need, and that remediation and consolidation piece all form part of that cloud strategy. And then you will execute your migration and what have you, and you move into your cloud operating model. Managing cloud is different than managing traditional infrastructure. So understand, what are the capabilities of cloud? How can I exploit them the best in terms of managing and maintaining my infrastructure? Who's going to be responsible and accountable? What are my SLAs? How do I measure them? Can I pull these tools and metrics into my existing tool set? Do I replace my existing tool set because this one's better? Understanding your cloud operating model is important. And so in terms of that cloud operating model, what is your governance strategy? You know, how are you going to align your investments against that corporate vision? How are you going to ensure and make sure that you are aligning your technology with your business goals? In the core operations, you've got your standard incident problem change management, major incident management, those elements. How are they going to be impacted by an adoption of cloud? Are there things that need to change? What is the opportunity space to make things better? From a security point of view, the security capabilities in the cloud are vast and immense, and how can they accelerate your security and compliance, whether that's through better controls or better reporting or better tooling? All those changes and capability in the clouds need to be managed. So who's going to do that, and how is that going to change your overall cloud operating model? And as well as your traditional support functions and your business management functions, how are you going to manage, say, third-party vendors? How are you going to manage your forecasting in terms of capacity? We talked about B2C organizations often have cyclical load. How are you going to forecast that to make sure that, yes, my web servers are fine, but my database might not be? So then we look at a cultural side of things. Is when you want to deliver a better customer experience, there's two kind of competing forces. There's the cloud governance team who are all about making things successful, But at the same time, they need to recognize the need for innovation and agility. Then you have the cloud adoption team who want to do all the cool and sexy things that you can do with the cloud that help drive that adoption. So it's creating that a balance between speed and control. Cloud adoption team are all about achieving business goals and aligning technology to those business goals. And then you've got the cloud governance teams that are making sure the controls and the best practice are in place when those things are adopted. Make sure that you balance those two out to enable you to move quickly but safely. So how do you do all that? Well, the cloud adoption framework is the answer to your problems. The cloud adoption framework is a really cool thing that's been developed over a number of years, and it actually uses real insights and real projects to inform its development. And that's also true of something called the well-architected framework as well. But so the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework is effectively a set of disciplines that you can follow. So we have touched on the strategy and your need for planning, but there's also the preparation steps of which I'm going to go into in terms of landing zones. This might be a concept that you've not heard before, but I'll go and explain that. It's about a best practice approach to make sure that you're scalable and secure. Adoption, that's actually getting your things into the cloud and starting exploiting the capabilities of cloud, making sure obviously everything is secure, managed and governed. So this framework covers that. I would strongly encourage you, if you are at the beginning of your cloud journey or you've already migrated to the cloud, there is still lots of benefit in delivering and reviewing the cloud adoption framework and taking the lessons it has to offer to heart into your organization, because it applies not just for people on day one, but at people on day 101. So, as I say, we've touched on those first elements, but I'll touch on some of the other elements. So just a recap of its capabilities. The cloud adoption framework is about your strategy, your business strategy, your cloud operating model. Your plan is around your assessment, making sure you've got the skills and your plan to achieve a migration, or the migration isn't just about moving from non-cloud to cloud. It can be moving from an area of cloud further up the cloud stack, making sure that the governance team would be particularly interested in the readiness step, because that's about the framework for control within that environment. And then you migrate further up the cloud stack or into the cloud stack, and then you have the opportunity to innovate further. That could be about re-architecting applications. This could be about addressing unresolved challenges within your existing organization. This could be about exploiting the power of AI, and which is so much easier than people think. And the AI piece is quite easy. The data piece is a bit more challenging. But the ability to innovate is much easier than you think when it comes, especially in that AI space. And then ongoing, again, that governance and management is a key part. So those are the 7 pillars of that cloud adoption framework. It's just Google Cloud Adoption Framework and go to Microsoft, and I'll have all the details, or reach out to me, and I'm more than willing to have a conversation with you about a best practice approach. Now, speaking of best practice approach, I mentioned this concept that you may not have heard before, which is landing zone. Landing zone is a concept that accounts for your organizations to be able to scale in a controlled, governed way. It supports rapid adoption, and it's something you do before. So think of it as digital scaffolding. If you were building a house, you might start with some scaffolding. You'd put your brickworks in place. You'd put your windows and doors in place, but those doors would need to comply to British standard XYZ. Those windows you'd probably want to have locks on. And then once you've got that element of the framework in place, you go inside and maybe you'll start partitioning things up a little bit inside your house, where to those different partitions or perform different functions such as bathrooms and kitchens, but the services they need inside those are different. You don't necessarily need internet in the bathroom, so you could, but you would want water services in the bathroom, and it's the same concept with a landing zone. It's the digital scaffolding that allows you to build your house before you've moved your furniture in. So your furniture is your data, your workloads, your VMs, your whatever. But getting that digital framework in place, it ensures that authorization, security and controls are in place. And I'll give you a little example. If you're familiar with the concept of Windows Active Directory and OUs, or organizational units, a similar hierarchical mindset will be okay for this as an analogy. But you start off with your tenant organization. Usually it'll be blah 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 on Microsoft.com, but that's your root of your tenancy. And then what you would do is you'd say, okay, the next level down, when it's OU in that example, I'm going to put my controls in. I'm going to implement an Azure policy that says antivirus on absolutely everything. Maybe that's your security policy. And you would deliver that control at that level. You could also introduce third-party monitoring if you have those within your organization. You've made an investment, you don't want to move away from that investment. You can deliver that investment. So here we've got Datadog as an example of something you might want to use, or you might want to make avail yourself with existing monitoring tools. But at the next level down, you would apply those cloud governance policies. But then we start thinking about the rooms in the house. One of the rooms is going to be processing credit card information. Many B2C organizations deal with credit card payments. If they are, you have this concept called a card data execution environment, and that needs to comport with certain standards, PCI DSS being a very significant one. What Azure does to make your life so much easier is they've got policies that you can just apply that will apply to, for example, a PCI DSS policy that you can go and apply and say, this area is my payment group, and I'm going to apply that policy to that payment group, whereas everything else is my app group, and I will have a different set of policies for them because they don't need the same controls in place. And then you would have your subscription. So your landing zone can have many subscriptions, and you may chop your subscriptions up however you choose. You may choose to do it by business criticality or between development, test and production. You can chop them up in any number of ways. But when you have those subscriptions, all those policies that sit directly above it in that hierarchy would apply. So the cloud governance policy and the app group policy in this case would apply. And only then, when you defined your identity access management you might need, you configured your shared services and networking, everything in place, you built your house, it's now on the market and ready for the furniture to move in, which are your workloads, which will sit inside those resource groups. These are just, think of those like Windows Active Directory groups. It's not a perfect analogy, but it'll do. And so you've now built your house. It's built to a standard that passes building control, and you have now purchased the house and you've gone in and you've moved your furniture into the property. The analogy kind of holds up in that regard. And likewise, we have our special room in our house, which is where, in this case, we're just processing credit card information. So we've got a payment gateway somewhere upline. Credit card information comes in on maybe these web services. They're stored in this database. Those are all card data execution environments. If it's dealing with the transmission or storage of credit card data, it sits in that environment, and it has to comport with different controls from a PCI DSS point of view. And once again, having that sort of thought process, I need to build this. It sounds complicated, but it actually isn't. And it's really important, because you can then scale anything within those business units, your app group, your payment group, whatever it may be, and the security and the governance will expand with it. So how can you get started? Let's look at money. Free money. We like free money. Microsoft Cloud Direct will put skin in the game if you are looking to make a change in terms of cloud space. There are pots of money called Azure Migrate, where We will provide workshops for you. We will do discovery activities, and we can provide the funding to cover off the costs of those activities. And then Microsoft's skin in the game is obviously they would like you to use Azure. They will pay for the development costs of that landing zone, whether any pilot or proof of concepts need to be done, the design activity and the migration, various sort of payment milestones these are effectively. So you can see that actually in that migration column, there is a whole lot of funding opportunity to be able to cover the cost of that change. Whether you're looking to optimize, maybe that's a workshop with me, maybe it's with one of my more experienced colleagues. Whether you're looking to modernize and move up that cloud stack, there are funding opportunities available. And there are many more, and you'll notice data and AI is one of them. That will be covered off on the next webinar. So if we drill into that migrate, if you are at the migration stage where you still have workloads that you'd like to move to Azure, and you'd like a professional organization that follows best practice to go and deliver that for you and have someone else pay for it, not too shabby. Then this is the funding pathway available to you. So it starts off with a workshop, understanding the needs. What are the goals? What are the objectives? What are the technical constraints and considerations that we need to be aware of? Likewise, what information can we give you in terms of preparation from your side, from the well-architected framework, understanding your business goals and how this change and what gets built is achieving and aligning with that business goals. Undertaking a discovery of your estate and doing that assessment to understand what workloads are within scope for migration, which ones are appropriate for migration. And I mentioned there's an opportunity with that discovery to say some should be retired, some should be retained, some should be rehosted. Understanding that landscape, very, very valuable. Then building out those landing zones, as I've just described, your digital scaffolding, undertaking, if relevant, a proof of concept and proving that concept and standing that up, doing the detailed design for your production workload. So maybe the proof of concept proves the concept in a particular way that impacts the design, so the design is created or updated to go and build out that infrastructure, and then we obviously undertake the migration itself. And all of those are activities of extreme value. They follow a best practice approach. It's Microsoft's defined approach for building these things out, and there are payment milestones that can be funded from either ourselves or Microsoft. Great conceptually, Leon. What does that really mean in real life? Well, if we look at a particular organization here, an organization wanted to migrate, move to the cloud. They'd identified a number of particular business drivers that they thought could be enabled by a move to Azure. So we went out and we did an assessment. We identified that 140 of their servers would need to migrate to the cloud, and indeed these options some other services, but and the total cost of that change was 120,000. But one of the things that we do, in fact we're very, very proud of, we have secured more funding for organisations in the UK from Microsoft than any other organisation. And so in this particular case, we got 77,000 in funding from Microsoft, and effectively 65% of the cost of change was covered by Microsoft. And that's, 65% discount on anything is extremely valuable. I've actually worked with other change activities where for slightly smaller organisations where it's covered 100% of the cost. For many times it's done that. It depends on everyone's particular use case. So when it comes to cost, whether you're in the cloud already or you're looking to migrate into the cloud, think about your cost optimizations. This blows my mind that why this isn't done more proactively. Think about sizing. This is really interesting. Like, again, in a VMware estate, you might have 4 CPUs of RAM. You might be able to get exactly the same performance from only 2 CPUs of RAM. But it's not just about the performance, because in your old environment, you might have had 4 CPUs of RAM, but you're only using 2 of those cores. Don't take what you have, get what you need. And so understanding the performance profile of your servers and right sizing them accordingly can be really, really valuable. So you might end up in a situation where I've got 4 servers here on really old tech that can perform the same as 2, but I only need 50% of the performance because that was over engineered. So now I only need 1 CPU, let's say. So you're right sizing. I did analysis a number of years ago I did so many assessments, and I pulled all that data together and took a holistic view. What I discovered is the average CPU utilization in an organization was 19%, and the average RAM utilization was 48%. That suggests there's a whole lot of resource and horsepower that had been over provisioned on average across many dozens of customers. Contracting the right way, and I'll give you an example of that in a moment. Exploit your licensing opportunities where you can. If you can go use platform as a service that includes the licensing, that can often be much more cost efficient. Go and if you already have an EA agreement, say with Microsoft, and you can bring your own licensing, and there's something called Azure hybrid use benefit that can have profound savings as well. So pulling these different levers together can save a huge amount of money. So to bring that to life, I can buy, there is a VM called a D2 V3. It's got 2 CPUs and 8 gigs of RAM. I could buy that on your pay-as-you-go model, which is what most organizations do. It comes with a Windows license. They turn it on, they run it 24/7, and they'll be paying £112 for that compute per month. I can get exactly the same service for about a £5. Couple of cups of coffee. That's a profound difference, and it boggles my mind how more organizations aren't seeing the opportunities to save money that are available in the cloud that they're not looking to properly exploit. And this isn't a day one position, because people make this mistake. They think, right, I've right sized, I've optimized, I've done it on day one. But cloud usage patterns change. Technology advancements from various projects change. It should be an ongoing activity. So you could sign up to a 3-year reserved instance contract, which basically means I'm going to buy this server. I know I'm going to have it for 3 years. Your domain controller might be a good example. I know I'm going to have that, and I know that's not going to change in the next 3 years. In fact, I'm going to bring my own license as well, because I've already got a license for that qualifies using that Azure hybrid use benefit. And now all of a sudden, I've saved like 70% of the costs. Or you're an organization that maybe wants to use compute, but so many organizations make this mistake. They assume that 100% of their estate needs to be on 100% of the time. And that almost definitely isn't true. Also, generally speaking, for a lot of organizations, at 3 a.m, the horsepower requirement needed for their environment is substantially less than what it is at midday. And so profiling, dynamically scaling your environments, adjusting those resources are opportunities available to you. In this example, we say there's roughly 730 hours in a month. But if you're an organization that says, I'm going to run my VMs, I'm a Monday to Friday operation, so some of my VMs I'm going to run 12 hours a day, 8 till 8 or 7 to 7, Monday to Friday, that's about 264 hours. 264 is roughly 1/3 of 730. That's 2/3 of the compute costs you're saving. So there's lots of opportunities, and there's something for less valuable resources called spot instances, and those are effectively unused capacity that you can get at a bargain discount from Microsoft. It does come with some caveats though. If that capacity disappears, there are other considerations, but there's ways to exploit that for certain workloads within your organizations, again saving you a profound amount of money. People just concentrate on the first step, maybe a little bit the second step, but it's all the elements that you want to do. So let's bring that to life with a real world example. We worked with an organization that is a large freight, think DHL, and you're not too far off. And this particular freight organization, they had they would often acquire other companies. So Smarco would take and they would buy up other smaller logistic companies, and that was a fairly regular occurrence. They had a goal to double their revenue over 5 years, and and acquisition was part of that profile. But acquisition created a number of other challenges. Also, they were delivering a traditional desktop environment to their existing estate, which created other management challenges. And performance challenges come to that, especially given one of their applications, Azure. So what they did was they came to us. We did an assessment, we secured a bunch of funding for them, and we were able to deliver a change. In this particular case, what we did was built a scalable remote desktop environment that would scale to meet their needs. So when they acquired a new company, they could just give them a URL, they'd be able to go and get onto those websites, start consuming their core business application Azure, and they could start using that capability straight from the day. They didn't have to wait to go through a procurement cycle and a build cycle of a bunch of PCs and then a distribution and an installation. They didn't have to worry about all that and the network links between the acquisition. They could just say, use your internet connection and get onto that service. And all the core staff within Smarco would use that as well. But what it would do is it would expand during the day and it would contract during the night. This resulted in a 40% cost savings just by optimizing that expansion and contraction. And remote desktops are a great example of something that can benefit from that scalability, because most organizations don't have humans working 24/7. Sometimes it's follow the sun models, but generally speaking, you can reduce your capacity at night. Don't necessarily exclude it, just reduce it. So when you're adopting cloud and when you want to start delivering better value for your customers, you want to start thinking initially about cost. How are you going to optimize the cost? Because when you optimize the cost, that frees up budget to go and start exploiting the cloud native capabilities, whether it be around high availability or AI-based services. If you're optimal, it opens up opportunities. And that opportunity is about delivering activities. When you start pulling in your data and you start getting that insights and you're using your budget more effectively with a customer-centric viewpoint of what you want to do, you can start delivering better customer experiences within your existing budget. And it's all about, and if you if your business case mapped out, it's actually going to be greater than my budget, but it will deliver a greater return on investment. Maybe that's an investment that you want to make, maybe it isn't, but understanding that with the planning phases beforehand gives you the answer so you can make a qualified decision. Making sure that you have agility in your operations. You might employ lots and lots of staff to deliver a certain outcome, but where you can be much more agile as an organization, much more responsive by using those tools. And when you're more responsive, you can start delivering, especially around fluctuating demand, you can deliver greater experiences for your customers. Have you ever used that? Did you ever remember in the pandemic, you have you go to the Tesco's website to go and do your shopping? I mean, the performance of that just fell off the floor. It take you an hour to even get a connection to the session. They just didn't have that scalable infrastructure to go and meet that prevailing demand. And then when you start pulling in your data, which we're going to come on in the other ones, you can start making really powerful data-driven insights. And those insights will help maximize your revenue in terms of promoting brand loyalty, to understanding which products and services are having the greatest impact on your business as a whole, not just from a P&L in terms of this is how much the product costs me and this is how much I sell it for, because those costs are made up of other elements inside your business. Those data, connecting your data, can start giving you that level of insight. Microsoft make loads of tools available for you. You can go and use Microsoft Azure cost management and billing tool to start understanding. This is a native tool that exists. There isn't a cost for running this tool. It just exists. Just go to a web page, much like Netflix, and you can start understanding your costs. It can start doing projections and forecasts of your costs. You can start breaking down. One of the things I like to preach is when you have resources, put something called tags on them. And then what you can do is you can start reporting saying this department or this business function belongs to this tag, a label. But then you can start reporting on different parts of your department, which ones are driving most of the costs. That can be informative. In terms of driving efficiency, look at your advisor. It can say that's over provisioned, that's under provisioned. You've got too much storage here. Your performance isn't good enough here. You should move that to a faster grade of storage. You've got too many instances of storage. I work for a very large global charity, and they have 13 copies of the same data for almost all their estate. Just bonkers. So understanding and looking at that advisor, that's like a hired professional working for you, advising you on what you should do to be more efficient. Azure Budgets is another one. Set up alerts and budgeting so you can turn around and say, right, my budget is X. Am I going to exceed that budget? If I am, send me an alert. Or when that department's exceeding that budget, send that alert. Configure budgets is really, really powerful. The last thing you want is bill shock. And so having that consistent insight, you could set up an alert to tell you each day, like, is my cost of change changing beyond the value of X? I expect it to increase by 1/31st each day. And if I deviate from that median, what was the cause of it? So you can be proactive. And then Azure Cost Calculator, a great tool. I use it all the time. What's something going to cost me? It's a tool that has almost 99% of Azure's products and services are available in this tool. You say, right, I want this, I want 2 of those, 1 of those, 3 of those, and it's basically a menu system. You say what you want, you put the configuration options in, and it will produce a cost estimate for you. Incredibly valuable, powerful for those that are looking to make certain changes. And then when it comes to those changes and delivering a better customer experience, think about, would it be valuable for my customer base if I retired this system? Would it be valuable to my business objectives if I retired this system? Would it be valuable to IT if I retired this system, or my internal user base rather than my external customers? Do look to retire and replace your certain systems. That is a really good opportunity. That especially the retirement, that's effective. You can get rid of something, great. If you're going to replace it with something else because it's performing a function that's needed, it's just that over here there's a better one. If you've got Microsoft 365, as probably most of you do, you've already got bucket loads of storage that comes with your OneDrive, for example, or your SharePoint. Most organizations that are looking to replace the really low-hanging fruit is get rid of your file servers. Go and consume the online services. Within that license, there's caked in loads of free storage and the cost of that license. Why pay for a server to go and do it? So you're maximizing your existing investment from 365 and not incurring costs from other systems. So there's many replacement opportunities in terms of old CRMs moving to investments you might have in Dynamics or reporting systems that you might have had with Crystal reports. You might want to go and move those to Power BI. You might have various automation systems that are in place that you can go and create with Power Platform, which may already be covered. The cost of that may already be covered in your existing Microsoft 365 subscription. It's a feature that most organizations have, very few people are using. And then go and look to, and by doing those, that top element, notice the statistics here. These aren't made up. This is an amalgam of statistics from various different migrations that have come from Azure, that actually most organizations can retire, replace, or relocate 20% of your infrastructure. If you're not doing that, one, it means that perhaps you've missed an opportunity. But 2, does that mean you're going to be incurring unnecessary costs by having something that you don't have to have for whatever reason? Those PaaS services, we kind of covered that off. If you have PaaS services, SaaS services, I apologize, utilize and exploit those capabilities and maximize those existing investments. Right at the bottom of the funnel there, we've got retain. There'll be some stuff that won't move. A great example is you might want to keep domain controllers actually in certain premises. Maybe you're worried about internet connectivity, and actually it's so important to have a domain controller on certain sites. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe it's an AS400 mainframe. Oh, bless you. The moving that isn't, whilst you can transform it to the cloud, you can't migrate it to the cloud, and you can recreate those functions that it does, but it isn't something. So you might retain that, and that might be a separate project to go and modernize that particular application capability. But in terms of that planning, you end up with, okay, now I'm left with a subset of systems that I'm going to be taking to Azure. So of those that I'm taking to Azure, I want to, SaaS where you can, sorry, platform as a service where you can, infrastructure as a service where you have to. That's my advice to you. Infrastructure as a service is the host of last resort, not as most people do it, the host of first resort. And because caked into PaaS capabilities within Azure are things like high availability, backup, auto scaling. It comes with a level of management and control within the service itself, often at a cheaper price than it would be to run it on infrastructure as a service. So utilize those PaaS services as much and as often as you can. When you migrate, go and do the low-hanging fruit first. Identify your interdependencies between applications, and then identify those that are maybe you do it by business criticality or by simplicity, but you'll group up your servers and you'll do maybe your first wave, and the execution of that will be great. You might use a partner to go and do it, you may go and do it yourself, but understanding and grouping these systems together, very important. And then maybe the more data intensive and high business impact applications, maybe they'll go over second. And finally, you'll look at your more challenging ones to go and move and migrate, or you'll work with a partner to go and do that. So in terms of migration, just common cloud mistakes in general. Failing to understand the complexity. Here's an interesting statistic I was reading a few months back. The failure rate of cloud adoption is going up. Now, you'd think logically, given how long cloud's been around since 2008 or whatever, you'd think the failure rates would be going down. But it's down to scarcity of resources and an inappreciation of the complexity involved. If you have many organizations say, right, I will take a DIY approach because it's too expensive to go with someone else. Well, some of that cost can actually be resolved through funding to go and mitigate that cost, and then be delivered by a partner that can follow best practice. Or you can do it DIY. But the percentage of DIY, because of the scarcity of the skilled resource to be able to do it, is actually driving up failure rates because of the DIY approach, failing to understand that complexity. Some of the things I've laid out today in terms of a well-planned approach will help deliver a successful migration, which is foundational to delivering a better customer experience. Understanding the relationship between applications. If you're going to group stuff into migrations, you don't want to take the web server over its database that it speaks to, stays where it is, and all that traffic's going. You group them all together. Understanding those dependencies, and that's a bit of a flippant example. Actually, dependencies are more nuanced than that. Understanding that and sort of mapping out that infrastructure, extremely valuable. It's also got a side benefit that when you understand all your dependencies and you've got those documented, moving up the cloud stack, you've actually got a lot of your documentation already done. But understanding that, so this is where discovery will be delivering value, as would security and compliance. You've probably all heard the scare stories about data loss. The vast majority of data loss is down to lack of controls. A funny, amusing thing is there is a security setting in AWS that says, for its storage, that says the people that can access this are only authenticated users. Great, they think that's wonderful. I have secured my environment because the only people that can authenticate and the only people that access it are the people that are authenticated from my organization. Unfortunately, that's not authenticating users means. It just means people who have authenticated with AWS. And so that could be people outside of your organization, people who have logged in to a service, not your employees, into AWS. and consequently that can mean data is exposed. So neglecting those security and understanding things results in the vast majority of data breaches are down to misconfigurations or neglecting that security component. Delivering that landing zone that we just talked about earlier on, Hubsolve for that, giving you the baseline to be able to go and improve and deliver highly available, responsive services to your customers. This is another one I've was chatting to someone last week before. They've done a migration project and they aren't getting the outcomes they were looking for. To be fair, they did use, I would use the word partner. They used an organisation to achieve the migration, but boy, were they not pulling on those 5 cost levers. The run cost was substantially more than the original estimate because they weren't putting the correct cost disciplines in place. And change. Cloud doesn't stand still. Make sure you are managing those change, communicating those change to the customers. You know, we've all been onto your mobile phone app to log into banking. It will be unavailable tomorrow. Communicate your changes, your change management processes with cloud, communicating with your customers, communicating with the internal stakeholders, controlling that change, whether it be migration, communication, project change that moves you up the cloud stack. Make sure you've got the proper controls in place to make sure you're mitigating risks and dispelling any fears. What you can do is you can speak to us at Cloud Direct. We can look at those funding opportunities for you. You can have a conversation with me about the art of the possible, just to conceptualize what might be able to done. You can what might be able to be done. You can speak to my colleagues if you've got a very specific opportunity that you want to go and explore. And one of the reasons why we're a particular safe pair of hands is we're an expert MSP. There are very few expert MSPs within the UK. We've got certifications and specialisms in a whole suite of different activities. And globally, we were in 2022, we were finalists for Partner of the Year globally. You know, we know what we're doing and we're very, very good at what we do. And we're very, very good at pulling on the cost levers that get Microsoft to pay for your cost of change. So within the B2C space, we've helped many organizations adopt cloud, move up the cloud stack. Whilst this conversation has been focused more around the infrastructure and the cost and the process and getting those foundational steps, I think it's key to understand that before we look at all the benefits that we're delivering to other organizations that then move up the cloud stack to start delivering better outcomes. So if you want to go and look at this next webinar, which is the part 2 of this particular story, it's Thursday, the 18th of April at 10 AM, and where we're going to dive into a bit more around the data and AI to deliver those customer experiences. And there's so many cool things to do. I might go and build some demos for you as well if you want to go and join that. Exploiting it is much easier than you think. I can probably maybe build something within a couple of minutes for you. Anyhow, before I drop off, usually in the UK the answer is no, but does anyone have any specific questions? So Adam, I don't know if you're moderating this, but if anyone's got any questions, I'll just leave it for a moment. Usually people are too shy to say anything and then I get contacted afterwards, but if you have got any questions, drop them into the chat now. I'll give it 10 seconds, and if we don't see anything, then I will close this session down. Okay, so I'm guessing not. Okay, feel free to contact Cloud Direct with any specific information. You can follow me on LinkedIn, just search for me, Leon Godwin on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me there if you want. And obviously you've got our contact details should you want to. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.